All right, am I sharing first, Michelle?
Yep.
Is that
Yeah,
okay?
that's the plan. Yep.
Just making sure. Okay, let's get started. So this is, as Michelle said, Volunteer Month. And at the Elwood House, along with a lot of other local history organizations and museums everywhere, our story cannot be told without volunteers. So I wanted to take a little bit of a dive back in museum history and talk about some of the efforts of early volunteers to kind of show how we got to the Elwood House Museum as it is today. So, Elwood House Museum, it was formed in 1964 when May Elwood, who is the one in that very contemplative picture there in the center, she donated the house along with her 3 children, Il, Patty, and John, to DeKalb to become a museum. So that's where the foundation came from. The first people to run the museum were not actually like a trained museum staff. They were a group of volunteers for the DeKalb County Fine Arts Association, which through my research I learned was actually a group that started to try to stop the local classical radio station from being changed to a different station. So that was their whole purpose. And as the group grew and took on new projects, they decided that they wanted to take on the Elwood House as an offshoot of their other projects. So the idea that they had was to turn the top floors of the mansion into an art center with offices and gallery space, and I think like classrooms for teaching and doing art projects in. And then the first floor they were going to restore to what it looked like when the Elwoods were living in the house. So the same sort of way we have it today. By 1967, it started in 1964, so 3 years later, volunteers were already hard at work completing the renovations, including opening up the second and third floors of the mansion, which had been closed when May Elwood was living there. She, toward the end of her life, she was living in the house by herself, so she didn't really need all 4 floors of the mansion. So she closed off the top 2, and those were no longer accessible. So they opened up that space. And they also decided in 1967 that the grounds would be great as a public park. So the grounds did eventually become one of the DeKalb Park District's public parks. And the plan that you see on the left here, that is one of the original drawings. I got this from the DeKalb Chronicle. It was an article in 1967 showing what their plans were. So the part that's toward the bottom of the screen, you can't see First Street on it, but that's where it would be. And then you can see the mansion is this part. I think my cursor shows up. Is that right, Michelle?
Yep.
Okay, so this is the mansion here, and then it looks pretty similar to how it does today. We've got the garden where it says lawn/exhibit area, but there was going to be a reflecting pool, which I think would be really awesome. So maybe we can bring that back. It's fun to see how much of this came to fruition. At the time that this plan was proposed, they already had some volunteers helping with the grounds outside. So the DeKalb Plumbers and Pipe Fitters Union, Local 612, volunteered to repair the iron fence along First Street. And the DeKalb Garden Club was recruited to help with the formal gardens and the restoration and maintenance of the mansion conservatory, which is the picture that you see there on the right. That's what it looks like today. So while the idea of turning the mansion into a multi-purpose art center didn't really come to fruition, the early volunteers did shape the museum in a lot of ways into what it is today. So these photos are from a June 14th, 1967 article about the opening of the Elwood House. So on the left, one of our volunteers there was arranging an exhibit of musical memories, is what the caption says. So those were all pieces of sheet music that were found in the 3rd floor of the mansion. And then on the right, working with some of the clothes from the Elwood House. And I think, if I'm correct, a couple of those mannequins are still in the museum's collection. So that's very fun. The article that these came from talks about all the work that went into opening the mansion to visitors. It talks about how a group of 30 women went through each room of the house, room by room, researching interesting pieces like the harp that the one woman has her hand on there, as well as pieces of furniture and decorations, alongside the story of barbed wire and the Elwood family. It talks about how knowledgeable each of them were with all of these aspects of the Elwood house. Community members also planned publicity for opening day. The junior high and high school students created posters to advertise it, and local sorority members worked on early bookkeeping for the museum. And then on the big opening day, Boy Scout Troop 33 handled parking and chairs. So when I was planning for this lecture, I wanted to find some examples of public programs that were put on by those first volunteers, because again, there was no paid staff in the early days. So everything that went on as the museum activity was done by volunteers. So these are newspaper write-ups. I have the years for them next to them, and press releases for some of those events through the years. So we've got the Salute to Texas, which is one of my favorites that I found. We had like a rodeo on site and square dancing and flew the Texas flag. And all of that, I think, was because the Elwoods had ranches in Texas. So that was the connection there. And there was a fashion show to go with that one too, which sounds all around very fun. And then the predecessor there to the art fair, which became the summer festival, that's an article from 1977. And it's talking about, that's a press release about the artists and crafters being invited to come share their makes. And then the winter lecture series, which, I mean, we are here, we're the descendant of that program. And then on the right is field trips, which is still a major part of our mission. The field trip program they were doing at that time was Under One Roof, which was a sort of investigation of the lives and the tasks of different people who lived in the Elwood house, from Elwood family members to servants to, well, children who are also family members, but just all the different ways people lived inside the Elwood mansion. And then the collection. So something that those early volunteers really laid the foundation for was managing the care and maintenance of a thousands wide collection, thousands of historic objects. Even without formal volunteer training, or museum training, those volunteers cataloged, photographed, stored, and exhibited artifacts in the mansion and the Curiosity Shop, which was at that point used as the visitor center. It was an exhibit space and sort of an entry point until the 1990s, when the visitor center that we have today was built. So the picture on the left is from 1990. That was a volunteer named Lisa Dutour, who was a volunteer intern who helped to catalog textiles, along with our volunteer, Joanne White, who was a real textile expert, and she worked here for years, and we still have a lot of her records and examples of her expertise. She was really great. And then the images on the right are of objects that were in the house when it first became a museum. So part of what those volunteers did was go through and see what was in each of the rooms, because in many cases they hadn't been gone through in a long time. So seeing what was in the house and taking photographs and cataloging them. And those pictures are also the pictures that they took. So as you can imagine, we've come a long way since then. We have much clearer pictures today, but we are really so grateful for all of the work that those volunteers and the love that they put into their work here at the mansion. So why volunteers matter? So it's very clear to see why volunteers mattered in the early days. Nothing would have gotten done without them. Fortunately, the museum now has a dedicated staff who do a lot of the planning of events and exhibits and caring for the collection, but we really do still rely on volunteers for many of the same roles that they had at the museum's start. Volunteers matter because we're here to serve the community, and volunteers are members of that community. They help us see what people are interested about and learning and doing at the Elwood House, and they connect us to groups that they're also involved in, like the Garden Club or 4-H groups or groups with their high school or college that foster new partnerships that are so valuable to the museum. They have roots in the DeKalb story that help us tell new stories about not only the Elwoods, but also DeKalb as more of a whole. and what it means to be from DeKalb. And all of that is in addition to the actual work that they do on site, lending their expertise in so many different areas to help us start and complete projects that we just could not do on our own. So let's talk about some current roles that we have at the Elwood House. So volunteers help with really every facet of the museum. In collections, we have people who help us to catalog items, taking pictures of them. We'll see another example of that in just a second. Tour guides is one of our main volunteer opportunities, people who really want to become knowledgeable about the house, the objects in the house, the Elwood story, what it was like to live in DeKalb in the early 1900s and late 1800s. Front desk, we have people who in a normal year, we haven't had this in 2020, but great people at the front desk welcome them to the museum, help them understand what's going on and where they can go and, you know, orient themselves to the site. And then garden and grounds, we have 10 acres of property here, and some of that is managed by the Park District, but some of that is managed just by the Elwood House staff and volunteers. So volunteers are a huge part of maintaining the grounds. And event volunteers, which is always really fun with our events throughout the year. And I wanted to sort of wrap it up today by talking about some of the big volunteer contributions from the last year, starting with our 2020 book project. So after the museum closed down due to COVID, and then restrictions opened back up a little bit again, we were able to open up a kind of sectioned off site for volunteers to work in at the visitor center. So it was like a no contact site, and they were able to come in and work for a few hours. They would just sanitize the space when they were done, and they worked on cataloging books. So we had hundreds of books that had not been cataloged correctly, which if you are not familiar with cataloging in a museum, we have a digital system that we use that keeps track of everything. It helps us see some basic information about each object and tells us where the object is, what kind of condition it's in. And the volunteers went through these books that had not been cataloged, and they not only took pictures, which is what you see here, but they made notes about the physical description of each object. So whether it was bound in leather or paperback or cloth, and if it had any markings in it, maybe there was an inscription from Harriet Elwood who gave it to her son, or in this case, there's a book plate in the front cover. They did information about the author of the book, the title, the year it was published, where it was published. So all of this information really helps us when we are doing research so that we can plug in those key terms that we're looking for and pull up relevant books, as well as other things in the collection. But the volunteers really focused on books. So that is now all input into our system. And so it's super helpful for us as we create exhibits and do programs throughout the year, and as well as for maintenance of the collection, just knowing what kind of condition everything is in. So then when we go to do work in the collection, we know what to prioritize. Garden maintenance. So this is a fun one because you get to work outside. Every year volunteers help us with the gardens. We've got several gardens here on site, and the one that you see in the picture here was actually originally planted in, I think, 1905 by May Elwood. And it had been grown over and was no longer there, but we found the original plans. And so more recently, we were able to recreate this garden. And now volunteers help us every year as we need to pull out old plants and plant new ones. We're going to be doing that again this year in the middle of May. So if you are interested in helping out with that project, that one is a really good one if you like spending time outside and gardening. And then our photo digitization project. So along with all the books that we have in the collection, we also have tons of photographs, whether they're in albums or loose. And it's hard to work with those because, first of all, you don't want to be handling them all the time. You don't want to be just sorting through them. So it's nice to have them scanned and digitized so that if we're looking for an example of the Elwoods doing something, or trying to see a picture of a certain person, or trying to understand what the mansion looked like in a particular year, it's nice to have those photos digitized. So our volunteers have started scanning these photographs, and they do high quality scans so they can be reproduced for an exhibit later if we need to. And then they're stored in our SmugMug account, which is an online database. And then a member of our staff, usually Donna, our Director of Visitor Services, who knows a lot about the Elwood family, she'll go in and add captions, any notes about context, and then they go out to the public facing side of that database. So anyone who wants to see our collection of photographs can go to the website that I have typed up at the top there, and they can see the photographs from the museum's collection, which is such a valuable resource, not only for the museum, but just for anyone in the community who is interested in learning a little bit more about the Elwoods, the mansion, or life in DeKalb in the turn of the century. So how to get involved. Our volunteer newsletter is something we send out every month usually, and it contains the volunteer opportunities that are coming up for the next month, whether it's training sessions or volunteer field trips, which we usually take at least one a year to a different historical site. We'll kind of exchange tours with their group of volunteers, and that information is available through our newsletter. So if you are interested in just keeping up to date with volunteer opportunities as they become available, you can send me an email at my email address listed there, and I'll add you to that list. To become a tour guide, we do ask that you attend training, which we have one coming up on April 20th at 7 o'clock. So again, if you're interested in that, go ahead and send me an email, and that will be on the next volunteer newsletter. And then, as always, we try to keep our social media accounts and our website up to date with everything that's happening at the museum, including, all of our different projects. And if you see something that looks really interesting that you'd like to get involved with, then you can always get in touch with us to see how you can get involved. So that is everything. If you have any questions about the Elwood House specifically, go ahead and pop those into the chat, and we'll make sure to at least answer those by the end.
All right. Nice job, Audrey.
Thank you.
I really think that there's a lot of overlap in what we'll be talking about, but I also just want to do a pitch for the different historical groups throughout DeKalb County that we all need help. And, if you have time or talents, this is definitely, many of these organizations can use your help. So I'm going to pull up my screen here. Okay, where did it go? It was just here a minute ago. Let's see. All right, hold on just a minute. That awesome technology here. There it is. Oh, you can see this now, right? Okay, fantastic. Okay, so here is our a real overview of our different roles that volunteers play here at the DeKalb County History Center. And like Audrey was explaining with the Elwood House, that volunteers were essential to getting our organization started.
I think that you're still on the Zoom shared screen. I don't think it's on your presentation.
I'm still what?
It's showing Zoom on the shared screen.
Oh, it says I'm screen sharing.
You might be screen sharing the wrong page. That's what I was doing.
Okay, now I'm going to stop, and I'm going to start, and then. Oh,
I see it now. There you go.
Okay, is that better?
Perfect.
Okay, thank you so much for letting me know you couldn't see. Good teamwork. So here now you can see the list of the different volunteer opportunities here at the DeKalb County History Center. But what I was starting to say is that as many of you know, that we started out as two, we had the Sycamore History Museum that started out in 1999 with all volunteers, and then the Joiner History Room that also required the dedication and support of many volunteers. And then in 2019, we came together. Right now, I am the only full-time employee. Rob Glover, who is the director of the Joiner History Room, is part-time. And then we have a couple grant-funded positions. So the role of volunteers here is just essential for us to be able to do all the different things that need to get done to make us be a successful organization. And you'll hear me say this a couple times: if you have time, we can find a job for you. So I'm going to stop here or start here with our archives and collection assistance. So here we have a volunteer that is reviewing some of the archival and collection materials. And as I mentioned, with the former Sycamore History Museum and the Joiner History Room coming together, there are some duplicates in the collections. And for many of us can remember, before materials weren't available as well as they are now online. So there's several pieces of newspaper clippings that have been collected for years and years. And there is still a value in that, but we don't need 2 and 3 copies of the same information. So we're going through, and it's kind of a tedious process of checking to see if we have duplicates. Is that material available online? And then, making the decisions if we need to keep it or discard it because it is available online. So we really are making sure that materials are not thrown away. If, we certainly aren't throwing away pieces that are not part of an online collection. So we're being, really doing our due diligence, and it takes a lot of time, but it will also provide space for all sorts of things that are coming in the door that I'll talk about in just a minute. We also have volunteers here that like Audrey was explaining, that add additional information to our records. So in combining databases and with the Joiner History Room and looking at materials, when we started using our program Past Perfect in 2001, there has definitely been a learning curve since we started that 20 years ago. And so we have volunteers that are going back and adding more information. So for example, on the left of this picture, you can see there's a newspaper, but it's a reproduction. So in the records, it just said Sycamore True Republican newspaper. And is it the original? Is it reproduction? Is it a copy? So again, all those details are really important. Is it in good condition? Is just time consuming, but again, makes our materials just that much more useful because we know exactly what we have in the collection. Here we have some volunteers that are really just kind of helping us keep up. We, like many of you, I think, over this past year have gone into cleaning, and you don't want to throw things away, and we're thankful for that. So you're contacting us to see if they connect to our mission here at the DeKalb County History Center. So here we have 2 volunteers that are accessioning new materials to the collection. And it's a little hard to see, but the person in the back is looking through materials from the Daily Chronicle. They have donated a lot of their negatives, which are amazing resources because they've just documented such an important part of our community's history. And but it takes time to enter all those, so we know what we have into the collection. And as you can see, we also are socially distanced with our volunteers, and we're wearing masks inside. So we certainly are meeting the guidelines set aside by the Illinois Department of Health to ensure everyone's safety as well. Oops. Here is another volunteer. As I say that, please note that some of these pictures are from before before COVID. So not everyone has masks on, and that's why. But here, Susan, she has a little photo station set up over here because every item that comes into the collection is photographed and added into the collection. Here's a close-up of our Past Perfect catalog. I believe Susan has recorded 22 steps that are part of the process of accepting a new item. So here you get the history of the item. There's a photograph here. We have give it an accession number so we can keep track of it. We give it a location. We have to know who donated it. And then, as I said, every item is taken. There's a photograph that goes with it, and sometimes more than one photo. So here with our textiles, this is a beautiful wedding dress that was worn by a couple generations. And so we put it on our mannequin, and then we take the pictures of it. So again, we can protect it. And if we don't have to go and look at the original, this is sometimes just as valuable, if not more valuable, in helping us use the collection. And then after we put in that initial field, then again, there's other key terms that we have volunteers add, again, just to increase accessibility. This is a lot of detail work. So as I go through this, I meant to mention this at the beginning. We have opportunities that are inside and outside, on-site and off-site, and frontline and behind the scenes. So this is definitely one of the behind the scenes part of volunteering here, and definitely one of the most detail-oriented parts of our work here as well. But we also have offsite projects, and this is definitely something new here. Like many places, we didn't want to lose contact with our volunteers. We spent some time brainstorming and how can we use their talents and while we're all shut down and at home. And this is one of the projects that we had started and really just took off during the pandemic. As part of our mission of being a county history organization, we have township records from not all townships, but from many of them throughout the county. And this is what these books look like. This is the 1850s. And for many of these townships, they're some of the earliest records that are available for these communities. So we're setting up a website. It's not live yet, but it is to provide these township records to the general public. And you can see this beautiful handwriting here. And any of you know that work with or know young adults, cursive is a lost art. Many students don't learn it in school, and therefore it is like reading a foreign language. And because of that, we're having volunteers transcribe these records. So here, this is a close-up shot. The website is searchable. So this has right here is a search for Coltonville. It comes up with where the reference is, and then you can see the cursive here, and then it's also transcribed. So again, here's another place where it lists the specific record. And it's also going to be a great resource for genealogists because all of the names, and here as well, are names. So this is an ongoing process, but over the last year, over 1,000 pages were transcribed. So it's really been just amazing to see this project blossom. But if that's not your thing, as I said, we have a wide variety of volunteer opportunities here, and even cleaning is something that we need help with. Well, staff does the disinfecting, just again, we're meeting the health department standards. Just washing floors or dusting is something that we would certainly appreciate some extra help with. Docents, this is another part that Audrey also talked about. That's always people are sometimes, well, what's a docent? And that's just our fancy museum word of saying a tour guide. And right now we don't have a tour on any exhibits on display. This is our last exhibit, Crossroads, Change in Rural America. And we had visitors and we have our volunteers, like Audrey was explaining, that are trained to give these tours. And we have them do practice tours so you're comfortable in answering questions. And we also have background materials in case someone asks you a question, you know where to go. So again, we want to set you up for success. Our next exhibit is planning to open in September with the history of DeKalb County in 100 objects. And like the Elwood House, we also have some amazing garden volunteers. At the History Center, we partner with the University of Illinois Extension Office and their Master Gardener program. And here they had their picnic out here last year. But I love this picture that they sent me. They are a fun group. They work really hard. And this past year, they received a $4,000 grant through Growing Together Illinois, which is a partnership with the USDA. So this was a competitive grant that we're just so excited for them that they were able to receive that funding. And it's connected to the SNAP program, which is a supplemental nutritional assistance program, providing assistance to families on a limited budget. And working with the Master Gardeners, they, in addition to partnering with the History Center, are also partnering with the Salvation Army to provide healthy vegetables and for a few weeks, some amazing raspberries to their clients. So the grant is going to provide plants, seeds, tools, supplies, and the equipment to grow the plants. But they need help to be able to have this all happen. They usually have one work day a year, or excuse me, a week. Last year it was on Tuesdays, but they're a pretty flexible group. They need help with weeding, watering, planting, harvesting, and delivery of produce. And even if you're not a master gardener, please don't worry about it. If you're even interested in learning more about gardening, they will teach you. It's a great group. And together over last year, they donated over 800 pounds of produce, which is really amazing. That goes everything from, let's see if they have a list of I don't have a list of all the different things that they grew here, but there's the heavier items like tomatoes to the herbs that they grew that are pretty light. So 800 pounds is amazing and just really impressive. They also, if you know of a group or like a church group or a scout group that's looking for service hours, they'd be happy to work with them as well. One of the reasons that we have this garden out here at the History Center is because this kind of connects to our story of being a former farmstead. And this is, again, like Audrey was saying, they could see in the ground how the space where the gardens used to be. It's the same here. This used to be where the vegetable garden is. Excuse me. We also have a kitchen garden where they would use those, the herbs and the tomatoes and the onions and the peppers that would have been, right out the kitchen door. That's where you're going to go get your fresh produce. And then we also have a flower garden. And then we also, in addition to all that, have landscaping around the History Center. So if gardening is your thing, there is plenty of opportunities here. And as I said, they're a real fun group of volunteers. We also use our outdoor space as a classroom. So here we have some day campers working with a volunteer, and it's just fascinating watching the kids in the garden space. One of the favorite activities is pulling out potatoes because one child digs a few and they get two. And then the next person takes a turn and they dig up four. And how come, they only got two, or I only got two potatoes and they got four potatoes. And it's like, that's how nature works. And just seeing them see how broccoli grows and different things like that. So it's really exciting to see them be connected to where their food comes from. We also do a garden story time. We have had for many years 2 retired teachers that have done garden story time outside. They read a book, sing some songs, and have some craft activities. And again, they've had programs that talk about ladybugs and bugs in general and worms, and do samples of the produce that's grown in the gardens. So these 2 retired teachers have retired again. This year, we're going to be partnering with the Sycamore Library. But if this is something, you'd be interested in, this is just a great way to, again, I love thinking broadly about how we, connect to our community. And for a big part of what we do is connected to education. We have a variety of educational opportunities. And here, this is where we have tapped into some of our teachers. this is such an essential a part of what we do. We have great things here, but if nobody knows about them, then we've got a big problem. So the programming element is just a huge outreach. We go from kindergarten here on these lessons plans are through 8th grade, but we also work with the high school. They have a history club, and well as working with Kishwaukee college students and NIU students and graduate students through it, and then retired teachers. So this is just a really great way for us to share some of the great stories and materials that we have with a variety of different audiences. We also partner with the Sycamore School District over the summer with their Oscar program. And we work with kids in a few in kindergarten through 5th grade, and they are just a captive audience. And it's so great to see some of the kids that come back year after year, because they're just, wait, I remember when we came back last year, this is where we, talked about, where the, again, how potatoes grow, or we made this art project. And it's just amazing to see, not just that they get excited about their local history, but they become invested in their community. We also do family programming, and this is what we really missed last year, is having everybody out here and doing all these different fun activities. But hopefully, we'll be able to offer those in some way, shape, or form, relatively soon. Again, but the safety of our volunteers is certainly the highest priority. We in 2019 we kicked off Kids Day Off of School programming. So a lot of families, they can't take off when their kids have off of school. So we did programs on Martin Luther King Day. Sycamore kids had off that Monday after Pumpkin Fest. So these, again, were just some really neat opportunities for volunteers to really show off some of the great pieces of our local history in a very friendly way here. All right, I see there's some people have trouble with audio. Someone said they're okay, so I'm just going to keep going here, and I'll talk a little bit louder. I don't know if you'd want to just kind of refresh your screen, or maybe log out and log back in. Hopefully that will solve the problem. I love this picture because here it highlights some of our younger volunteers. This was with an old exhibit, but we have some volunteers that are in high school, and it's great for that college application too. So don't think that you have to be an adult to volunteer out here at the History Center. Property, this is where we use the muscle here at the History Center. This is a picture of people taking down and putting up an exhibit. That work, again, will be needed at the beginning of September. But even just some general maintenance here around the History Center, there's always a few odds and ends that we need assistance with. And, I can kind of fumble my way through things, but it's always good to have someone that I can call and know that that'll be done correctly and more often in a timely fashion. Like Audrey, we also have our reception volunteers, and while we used to call them our smiling faces, we'll be calling them our smiling eyes. It's so weird to see this picture now without having the plastic shield in front. But again, it's we do when we are open now for researchers, and again in September we'll have our exhibit open again. But these volunteers answer the phone, answer the door, greet visitors. And in the meantime, if it's a slow time, we always have a different volunteer project for them to work on as well. Or if you just prefer to answer the phone and talk to people, sometimes the funnest parts is just seeing the change and shift with our volunteers. They were sometimes here for an hour or more just talking to each other. So it really is, it's a close-knit group, and they really have enjoyed getting to meet some new people as well. Another big part of the volunteer opportunity, and where we depend on volunteers greatly, is our research specialists. We have people that come in all the time that are doing research. Many are genealogists, many are researching their home, and we could use more help with that. It's a big part of what we do, and it's people are so thankful and appreciative. But right now, one of the big parts of what we really want to do is make sure that we have materials before people come. Again, just in keeping, we have, just because of the limited numbers of people that we can have in this space, and with the sanitation between visitors and pulling things, we just want to make sure it's worth someone's effort to come out. But if you like doing research, please let us know. Not only do we work with the public in research, we also have internal needs for research. So every year we do a historic tour of homes. This past year it was a virtual experience. In previous years, it was an actual tour in the homes, but a big part of it is researching the history of these homes. And that takes a lot of time and energy to do. Another part where we use research is on our exhibits. So again, both the front-facing work of exhibit work, as well as doing work with the public and their research requests, are key elements to what we do here as an organization. And this is the newest opportunity here is video work. And while this has been, we've connected with some recent graduates, we've had to do a whole lot more video work than we've ever had to do before. And if this is something you're interested in, let us know. We can certainly use help both in recording videos and editing videos and helping us push those onto our website and social media. But this has done, we're so grateful in these people sharing their talents with us. So we've been, again, still able to connect with people over the years. So just to end on, you know, a reminder that if you have time, we can put you to work. And we also want to, you know, encourage people to check out their other local historical societies because they also have plenty of needs. So contact us, contact the Elwood House, but any local history group is certainly more than willing to work with you and your talent set. So just to wrap up here, I had a volunteer. I asked if they had any stories or anything that they wanted to share. And she just says that she thoroughly enjoys working with the collection because every treasure has a story to tell. And as she's working with those pieces, she really just loves thinking about what those stories are. So I thought that was just kind of a really neat piece to end my part of the program. So I don't know if there's any questions or comments. I know I saw some volunteers that are part of both of our organizations on the call today. So if they have any thing they would like to share, we can open it up to the participants.
So I got one question earlier about when the Elwood House started having paid staff. And I think the question didn't come through to everybody, but my answer did. So I think the first paid positions started opening up in the Elwood House in the early 1980s. And I wrote that I think that Jerry Brower, our first director, started in 1987. I don't have the actual year in front of me. It might have been a little bit earlier than that. But yeah, that's the history of the Elwood House staff for you.
Any other questions or? Oh, here's one. How long have I been at the History Center? Well, I started out as a volunteer in 1999. I was then on the board for a couple of years, and then some funding came available for me to work about 15 hours a week, and that was in 2005. So I have been here since. I became full-time in 2019 when we moved out here to the History Center. So yeah, it's been amazing to see the changes that we've come through, but our reliance on the volunteers to be a successful organization hasn't changed. I think we're even more dependent now than we have ever been on the volunteer help. One thing that has changed though is just our hours of availability. Before it used to be, Tuesdays and Thursdays, and now pre-COVID it was 6 days a week, but now we have that option of online work, and that's really I think also a great opportunity for volunteers that have full-time jobs and are busy on the weekends. But if they have time on the evenings that they're interested in doing a project, that transcription project is a great example of something that is an important job, and you can do it on your own time schedule.
Michelle?
Yes.
Teresa, I'm very curious. Have there been any talks about what to do with the old farmhouses that we used to use for exhibits or research?
Yeah, no, that is a great question. We are in negotiations right now with the city of Sycamore in becoming owning the whole property. That's been kind of it just has complicated things. So for example, the corn crib, we know that building it's in good shape right now, but it needs some attention. And the city of Sycamore has a lot of other priorities, and we totally understand that. And as a government, they can't get, it's more complicated to be able to have something fixed versus a nonprofit. So we're trying to get through those discussions first. And then really, we did a strategic plan last February, which was awesome timing. But there were still key elements in that strategic plan. And it was a campus vision is a real important goal. So as the weather gets nicer, that is definitely one of the discussions that we're going to be having, is what to do with the corn crib, what to do with the larger house that was the former place where we had our exhibits. Right now, we're actually using a lot of pieces that used to be in the Joyner History Room in that building, just because with the health department's requirement, we could only have one person in the Joyner History Room with the requirement. So we made those accommodations, and we have a partnership with the Stutz Fire Truck group, and they have the Stutz in the garage. Again, we're still waiting. They can't move forward until we can figure out what the paperwork is. So unfortunately, it's kind of in limbo right now, but we're hoping within the next 6 to 9 months that we'll have a solid campus vision of what we might be able to do on this property for the next, in the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, I miss the old research house, although it was creepy at times. But where's the Stutz located now? The fire truck, is that still?
It's in the garage where we used to do our outdoor programming. Yep.
So are you guys, or either Elwood House and the center, are you planning any outdoor activities for the summer at all? Or
Audrey, do you want to go ahead on that one?
So our activities are still a little bit, we're waiting to see where the guidelines go. We really want to follow the health guidelines for each of our programs. We're hoping to have some music at the mansion this year, which is always an outside activity along the front of the house. And if the restrictions allow, if the guidelines allow, I would like to have some Elwood Explorers youth programs outside this year. But again, those are up in the air, to be determined still.
And we're in the sorry, I had a volunteer texting me with an important question. Nothing like multitasking here. It never stops. We are also cautiously looking at what the guidelines are and the numbers. It looks like we might do the garden story times with the Sycamore Public Library, as they would all be outdoor programming. We have an online scavenger hunt that people can do, so they can again come out to the History Center and learn some information about us as a former farmstead. Our guided walking tours this summer, we're still trying to figure out what that looks like. If we do anything, it would have to be registration only, no drop-in programs. to have that crowd control. Because I know in those walking tours, sometimes we would have 20 people show up, and then other times we would have 2 or 3. As the guidelines roll out, we, will continue to reevaluate everything we do. Our goal is to open the exhibit in the fall and maybe early September with the history of DeKalb County and 100 objects. And it's been so hard because we would make progress and then a setback and a progress and setback. So I really think that we're just hoping that we're all in a better place by September and we can get through the winter. But to have that crystal ball, but believe me, we'd be the first to celebrate that we have public programming, because as much as I love connecting with everyone through Zoom, I really miss seeing you all in person.
Thank you.
Yeah, great
Thank
question.
you for all you guys do.
Well, we couldn't do it without you.
I'm anxious to get back, definitely.
Wow.
I'll be a little more comfortable after my second vaccination, so.
Oh, awesome. It's so great to hear that, yeah, a lot of our volunteers have had their first and are close to getting that second shot. So yeah, great progress. And that will certainly make a big difference in what we're able to do and keeping everybody safe at the same time.
Yep.
All right. Well, I think we can go ahead and I'll stop